The development of technology has greatly increased the cost of game production. Whether it's an indie game or a casual game, big games cost a lot of money to develop. Still, it was usually between tens of billions to hundreds of billions and rarely exceeded 1 trillion. However, President Ichikawa called the 11th group from the start. Your budget will always go over your budget, so you may need more than that. The amount of money is getting bigger these days, but 11 trillion won is enough money to take over several large companies. It would be possible to take over an entire game company that is said to be in Korea. No matter how much Ichikawa Shigeru, if someone else had gone and called for this amount, he would have been treated like a madman. I asked him. The development cost is shocking. Does that have anything to do with the fact that you asked for $30 million in acquisition costs a while ago? President Ichikawa nodded his head. As a game company called Actaron, we have several patents related to technology that links the sense of touch with games. Take-You briefly explained. Virtual reality games have different interfaces and input-output methods from previous games. If development proceeds, there will not be one or two other companies to acquire. President Ichikawa continued. I've tried VR sex devices made by Faceit, and I've also ridden the AD3 made by Keras. Each of those products made major breakthroughs in pornography and automobiles. I think now is the time for such innovation in games as well. He talked about his ideas in earnest. He wears a device that combines VR and communication on his head, and a remote controller like a gauntlet in both hands. And through it you move the character and traverse the field. Take-You nodded eagerly as he listened to the explanation. It gives the effect of a vibrating pad. Yes. It might give you some pain as a penalty. That would be fine. When a character hits, it hurts myself, and when I hit it I feel a blow. We didn't know what to do, so we just listened quietly. Anyway, it looks like fun. After a while, after the conversation was over, Sanjiop Sr. asked. The game you are making right now is great enough, so why do you want to develop a virtual reality game? I felt it while making Lost Fantasy this time. I don't want to make games that anyone can make anymore. I want to try a game that no one else has ever made. It is commendable to have a spirit of challenge without being complacent with success. However, there is no guarantee that it will lead to further success. This is a project that takes a long time and a lot of money. In the past, I would not have even dared to challenge myself. The most difficult part of developing a game so far has been the breadth of investors and managers. Because of that, it was not uncommon for the development direction to be changed or the scenario to be modified. So Linux Pentagon came out. Investors' pursuit of profit and artistry as a creator inevitably collide. Directors and projects are sometimes shut down due to such disagreements. But we haven't touched anything since we invested. Because I didn't know anything about games, and Take-You was unconditionally in favor of what he was doing. He has already decided to make a virtual reality game. What's left is my choice. Even if the development cost is $10 billion, we don't have to pay all that money. The revenue coming from Lost Fantasy M and Lost Fantasy Online will also be partially covered. The dividend will have to be abandoned for several years. Given the speed of technological development now, it is only a matter of time and virtual reality games will come out someday. And we have the technology and funding to support it. Carlos Artificial Intelligence, Machine Learning and Cloud Computing Technology. Faceit's VR technology and algorithms that process big data. This is truly a huge project. And Shigeru Ichikawa is the only person who will lead the way. He's been making the games he wants to make all his life, and he'll make the games he wants to make no matter how many years it takes. The advent of the internet has dramatically changed people's lives enough to be called a revolution. One of them is that it has expanded the realm of human perception. Space is not only a physical entity but also exists in consciousness. So, the internet becomes a space, a bulletin board where people gather becomes a cafe, and a site that sells goods becomes a shopping mall. And people meet each other in online games. Therefore, even if you are in a small room, you do not feel stuffy if you have internet access. Conversely, no matter how large a place is, if there is no internet, you will feel frustrated and anxious. The development of smartphones and wireless communication technology has created an environment that can be connected to the internet anytime, anywhere, and has now evolved into the Internet of Things (IoT). In a way, the internet may have come from the Paleolithic Age to the Neolithic Age. And giant IT companies are now opening the Bronze Age and preparing to move into the Iron Age. And games play a very important role there. Although some countries designate gaming as one of the 4 major addictions along with alcohol, gambling and drugs, and impose all sorts of restrictions, such as a shutdown system and a preliminary review system, most countries are not sparing their support from the state. The reason is that gaming is a huge industry that creates tremendous added value. What kind of future will virtual reality games create? Maybe it could change the world beyond self-driving electric vehicles? It doesn't matter how much development cost as long as it succeeds. If you fail, you will waste not only money but also time. I asked President Ichikawa, "What is the name of the game?" I am currently thinking of it as an extended version of Lost Fantasy Online, and I first named it Sarana after the continent. At that moment something flashed in front of my eyes. After a while when I woke up, people were staring at me. It must have seemed like he was alone. I quickly got up from my seat. "I'll go to the bathroom for a moment." Taikyu quickly followed. After confirming that it was just the two of them, I said exactly what I had just seen. When Taikyu heard the story, he was astonished. "What? 100 million people? Speak quietly." "Ah, okay. By the way, is it possible to have 100 million concurrent users?" Taikyu thought with his arms crossed. It was impossible in the past. However, after the Chinese market opened, millions of concurrent users came out of nowhere. Some of them were taken by 10 million people. 10 million people accessing one game at the same time? This is equivalent to the population of any country. Online games are characterized by crowds. Who wants to play online games that no one else plays? As for item trading, the more users there are, the higher the price, and the lower the number of users, the lower the price. Lumina's dragon sword was cut in half as soon as the accessor tape was cut. I remembered the words of an IT expert I saw in an article. *FaceNote has it all. Because everyone is on FaceNote. Sounds like a simple pun, but it goes straight to the point. The purpose of SNS is to connect with people. By the way, everyone who uses SNS already has an account in FaceNote. Therefore, those who want to use SNS have no choice but to create an account in FaceNote. Likewise, in online games, the more users there are, the greater the meaning of play. If it's a game you play alone, no matter how hard you develop your character and get good items, it's just self-satisfaction. However, in online games, all of them can be exchanged for real money. If we just preempt the platform of virtual reality games, wouldn't we be able to continue to attract users in the future? How much money can I get for this? MMORPGs are either a billing system or a flat rate, but this should be done with a flat rate. It's usually around 20,000 won or 3,000 won. If it's a virtual reality game, wouldn't it be possible for 50,000 or 100,000 won? When people get enough to eat and live, they find entertainment. The term homo ludens is not for nothing. Online games can be enjoyed for a long time with less money compared to other hobbies. Not only China but also emerging markets such as India and ASEAN can be explored. If the fee is set at $50 per month and 10 million paying users are secured, $500 million. If you have 100 million people, that's $5 billion. This amount will keep coming in every month. If this is true, the $10 billion development cost is not a problem. If you make a game once and succeed, there is no need to spend a lot of money. Even after accounting for operating costs and publishing costs, the profit margin is tens of %. If you think about it, it's strange. Among the companies we bought, OTK Games is right next to Keras and Faceit in terms of market. The first two companies were selected by Yeji, but in OTK Games, Taikyu just decided to invest. At that time, the investment was only 1 billion yen, but now if you want to acquire OTK Games, you have to pay at least 1 trillion yen. And if the virtual reality game succeeds, even if you pay 10 trillion yen or 20 trillion yen, you can't buy it. I tapped Taikyu on the shoulder. Well done. Taikyu blinked his eyes as if he didn't understand English. Huh. What am I? Just because a holding company is a holding company, it cannot control the technologies of its subsidiaries at will. But you can ask for cooperation. Keras and Faceit showed interest and expressed their intention to actively support them. Of course, it is not free and conditions must be negotiated. Team leader Seo Sang-won went back and forth between the United States and Japan to coordinate each other's terms. Meanwhile, OTK Games held a public presentation at Tokyo Big Sight. Even with the high antipathy towards OTK company, the audience flocked like a cloud, and the competition for tickets was fierce. There was a commotion in front of the building with some Japanese conservative groups and anti-Korean groups protesting, But it wasn't a big deal. With the attention of gamers and media around the world, the official release date was announced along with the start of the Lost Fantasy Online Open Beta service. Since the Open Beta service was freely available to all users, it was as if the game was actually released to the public. Towards the end of the presentation, Shigeru Ichikawa came forward and made a shocking statement. Lost Fantasy made a mark in the history of gaming. Many consider Lost Fantasy Online the end of its history. But my opinion is different. Lost Fantasy Online will be the starting point of opening a new world. OTK Games will create a virtual reality game that expands the Lost Fantasy world. To that end, we are moving our headquarters from Tokyo to Detroit and working with several companies. At this announcement, the venue was completely shaken. Reporters flooded in with questions. How long do you think the development period is? Do you think it is possible with the current technology? Are there any remedies for failures in the past? He answered briefly. We plan to complete the development within 3 years. Not long ago I met CEO Kong Jin-hoo and was promised all support. This project will not be stopped no matter what. That is all. Virtual reality game development. The so-called Surana project has wowed gamers all over the world. Are you going to make a virtual reality online game? After all, the Otaku company. Is the virtual reality game that you can only see in game boards really appear? Not quite yet. It's not just exchanging electrical signals with the brain, it's just exchanging visual information using VR. First of all, that's the way it is. If the technology is further developed later, something like a real capsule could be made. Read more at wuxiax.com. Will this really work? Kong Jin-hoo invested, so there's a lot of potential, isn't it? Where does the development cost come from? I will support you with the money you stole from the Japan Public Pension Fund. Like this, Japan is also contributing to the development of world games. The open beta service started at the same time in Korea and Japan. After that, even if it is officially released and paid for, the characters raised in the open beta service are linked as is. In Korea alone, there were 300,000 concurrent users. I don't know how much of it will be converted into a paid one, but it can be said to be a jackpot from the start. Those who have played the game themselves gave high marks for the world view, graphics, and ease of operation. While the number of subscribers exceeded 1 million and cruised, an official notice was sent to OTK Games Korea. We received it. Request for self-regulation cooperation on Lost Fantasy Online. Strategy. We ask for your cooperation in the following matters. 1. Access time is limited to 4 hours per day to ensure the right to sleep and learning for young people. 2. When making payments for teenagers, be sure to obtain parental consent and prepare a device to block transaction of game items by teenagers. 3. Measure the game addiction inducement index before official distribution. If the index is high, you can request to modify the game content, and if you do not comply, restrictive measures including prohibition of distribution are implemented. 4. Measures and fund preparation for game over immersion. 5. Probability notice for stochastic items and prohibition of excessive speculation. 6. Prepare our own censorship and regulatory measures for violence and sensationalism in the game. 7. For the realization of gender equality in the game. Since then, the demands have been endless. Takeu said as if he was absurd. What the hell is this? Where did you send this? Of all the government departments, there is only one place to send such a message. I sighed after checking the sender on the official document. It was sent by the Ministry of Gender Equality and Family. After checking, it was not only OTK Games Korea that received the official notice. It is said that most game companies have received official notices with similar contents. I didn't quite understand, so I asked. But why is the Ministry of Gender Equality and Family sending this? Gaming is a cultural industry. Isn't the Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism in charge? On this side, Takeu, who was quick-witted, said, the issue of game regulation is effectively the responsibility of the Ministry of Leisure. Why? The Youth Protection Committee is under the Ministry of Leisure. That is why the Ministry of Recreation and Leisure takes the lead in the shutdown system, the healthy use of internet games for teenagers, and the judgment of harmful media for teenagers. I read the memorandum carefully again. First of all, the first part is a bit absurd. Are you saying limit the access time to 4 hours to guarantee the right to sleep and the right to learn? You said there is a shutdown system already. Take-You explained. The shutdown system is a bill that blocks access to online games from 12 p.m. to 6 a.m. for teenagers under the age of 16. If you are logged in before then, you will be forced to log out. What if you run a raid together to catch a boss monster and the healer is a middle school student? At 12 o'clock, the healer is thrown out immediately, and the other characters cannot be healed and are annihilated. In fact, this happened quite often in online games, and around midnight when you play cooperatively such as raids or group battles, you have to check your age. A few years ago, during an esports competition, the match was delayed and after 12 o'clock, a Korean gamer withdrew. What kind of Cinderella are you? Huh. That's why it's called the Cinderella Law. This incident was featured in the press around the world, and was recorded as the most absurd event that occurred during an esports match. The Korean game industry is dominated by online games. As a result, the shutdown system hit the game industry directly. However, the shutdown system only applies to online games, and console games and mobile games are not included. Some game companies deliberately increased sensationalism and violence to make it 19 gold, or even moved overseas to avoid regulations. To this problem, game companies have repeatedly raised the issue of equity, and the Ministry of Recreation has recently come up with a solution. How? From now on, we will implement a shutdown system for console games and mobile games. It's a genius solution. Anyway, if I ask you to limit this to 4 hours, doesn't it mean that you shouldn't play the game at all? There was even a kind explanation written under it, saying that it would block access to the game every 2 hours and allow it to reconnect only once after 10 minutes due to the cooling off system. I flipped through a few more pages and couldn't contain my absurdity. 13. Prohibition of directing and expression that presents uniform standards for appearance in the game. 13-1. Do not present uniform standards of desirable appearance. In the game, uniform appearance standards are indiscriminately emphasized. If all the characters come out as handsome and beautiful, there is a risk of promoting appearanceism among teenagers who play the game. 13-2. Avoid overproportioning female characters with similar looks. The age and appearance of female characters in the game do not vary. Most of the female characters are in their 10s and 20s, and they have clean skin, a thin body, a feminine hairstyle and clothes that reveal the body. Please diversify this by age and appearance. What nonsense is this? It is not that there are no necessary provisions. Who would say no to protecting youth, preventing game addiction and regulating speculative practices? But most of them are absurd provisions. If you want to meet all the rules listed here, you have to rip and fix the whole game starting with the character design. Fortunately, this is not a correction order, but a request for cooperation in self-regulation. It's not compulsory, so you don't have to follow it. But if the relevant ministries receive such an official notice, which company can ignore it? Taeyong said in anger. In the end, this inevitably leads to self-censorship. It's the government's oppression to limit creative freedom. Okay, calm down. It's rare for him to get so angry. The guy who laughed even when he was arrested and dragged in handcuffs would be so angry at the game regulations. We had a video call with OTK Games. Shigeru Ichikawa, who received the report from OTK Games Korea, responded with excitement. What do you mean by not letting female characters with similar looks come out? I've been working on this floor for over 20 years, but this is the first time I've heard of the government pointing out that the game character is a pretty girl and asking them to fix it. I sighed. Actually, I heard it for the first time. What the hell is the organization doing there? So why are you sending such an official message? How do I explain this to foreigners? Shigeru Ichikawa is the father of the Lost Fantasy series. And this Lost Fantasy Online is a masterpiece that he created with all his might. A game is like a child to the creator. The proposal to fix it to suit the government's taste was an insult in itself. He said firmly, I am aware of the issues of speculation, sensationalism and violence, and I made it by reflecting it from the development stage. We stopped when we stopped the service in Korea, and we can never accept such a ridiculous request for revision. Taeyong nodded his head. I am of the same opinion. It's better not to release it than to ruin the game that way. At those words, President Ichikawa made a slightly moved expression on his face. Well, which investor would say this? I'll take care of this for you, so don't worry about it and just focus on what you're doing. Okay. I looked into the background for the Ministry of Gender Equality and Family to send this official letter. And I was able to figure out the situation right away. It was during the Park Si-hyung administration that full-scale regulations on online games were put in place. The government designated gaming as one of the 4 major addictions along with alcohol, drugs and gambling, and implemented a shutdown system to prevent youth from addiction to gaming. I know that gaming, alcohol, drugs and gambling are the 4 major addictions, but why are you missing cigarettes? Do not know. You must have played an online game and said, that game is a harmful game. In any case, despite the opposition from game companies and youth, this policy received a great response from public opinion. Thanks to this, the ruling party of the Republic of Korea, now the Liberty Korea Party, which was the ruling party at the time, proposed the Act on the Prevention and Treatment of Internet Game Addiction Support. The name is plausible, but if you look into the contents, it is literally covered with all kinds of game regulations. Fortunately, the bill did not pass the National Assembly and was automatically repealed upon the expiration of the term. However, lawmakers from the Liberty Korea Party, such as Representative Lee Jong-hae and Representative Na Kyung-yeon, recently started to propose the bill again. Several lawmakers from the New Politics Party also put their names on the joint initiative or supported the bill. From the perspective of game companies, who were secretly expecting that regulations would be eased with a change of government, they were struck by lightning. In addition, as the Minister of Gender Equality and Family Shin Mi-shin, a member of the new political party, is strongly supporting it, the possibility of passing the bill is higher than ever. Then why is the Leisure Department so passionate about game regulation? There are 2 big reasons for this. The first is because it is the easiest way to get support. When games are regulated, parents love it. All parents in Korea, both liberal and conservative, do not like their children playing games. And while parents are all precious voters with the right to vote, minors do not. I nodded. I'm coming to say this now, but in the past my mother was very worried about playing with you. Dean was surprised. What? Why? After I met you, I didn't study and just played games. The reason I fell in love with the game was because of Taekwondo. Well, if it wasn't for him, he wouldn't have been able to play the MG Lutnia, and then he wouldn't have had to sell his character to exchange for bont. After all, it's the online game that made OTK Company what it is today. Taekwondo said as if he was embarrassed. After all, you went to Korea University. Come to think of it, it was like going to a different high school than you. The second is money. Any Buddha can use its power only if it has money. So, the Minister of Strategy and Finance, who deals with the budget, also serves as the Deputy Prime Minister of Economy and ranks first among all ministers. And other departments compete fiercely to win their respective budgets. At the heart of this bill is money. According to the bill, funds are raised for the establishment of the Internet Game Addiction Healing Center, and the Minister of Leisure is in charge of raising the funds. To this end, the Minister of Leisure may collect funds from Internet game-related business operators within the limit of 1% of annual sales. Not 1% of net profit but 1% of sales. Although a game company has a large net profit as a percentage of its sales, 1% of its sales is a huge amount. Theoretically, it is possible to collect funds from companies that are in the red. In addition, if violations are found, an additional fine of up to 5% of sales can be imposed. Are there many game addicts or smartphone addicts? Of course, there are many smartphone addicts. However, it does not raise a portion of its sales to smartphone manufacturers. I don't bet on YouTube just because I'm addicted to videos, or to FaceNote just because I'm addicted to SNS. Nevertheless, the reason why such restrictions are applied only to games is because it is the most blissful. If the rules are applied as much as possible, most game companies will go bankrupt. Of course, unless the government is determined to kill the game industry, it won't do that. Dean shook his head. That's because you don't know the Minister of Leisure right now. Do you not feel anything after reading this official notice? I feel something. As long as the bill is passed, the Minister of Leisure will have the power to run game companies at will. Then in the future, game companies will have no choice but to watch the Leisure Department and make games. From what I've heard, it's definitely a serious problem. In addition, the bill included a clause to strengthen the shutdown system. Currently, it is for under 16 and for 6 hours from 12 p.m. to 6 a.m., but according to the new law, it will be raised to under 19, and the time will also be increased to 9 hours from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. At this point, it's like saying that minors shouldn't play games. In addition, all games must be measured for the Internet Addiction Induction Index before release. If the Addiction Induction Index is high, distribution may be banned. What's even more absurd is that when a patch or update is made, the addiction-inducing index must be remeasured. What is this? It is true that game addiction is a serious problem and we need to find a solution. But games and drugs are different. As drugs are illegal and harmful in themselves, they must cure addiction while thoroughly regulating the industry to annihilate itself. But games have the net function of being a hobby and entertainment that fills people's leisure time. However, the recent legislation is nothing more than defining the game as a social evil. If game addicts arise and treat all games as harmful and impose regulations, the entire industry may collapse if done wrong. There are regulations in any country, but Korea is particularly harsh. Korean companies have no choice but to follow government policies. However, foreign companies are relatively free. Read more at wuxiax.com. There are many ways to avoid it from our point of view. Lost Fantasy Online has no servers in Korea. However, it is only providing official services by setting up a corporation in Korea. It was initially released simultaneously in Korea because Take-Two invested in OTK Games and offered it as a condition to release it in Korea at the same time, but it is not a situation worthy of being so hung up on the Korean market. Shigeru Ichikawa was aiming for a worldwide box office from the production stage. In fact, Lost Fantasy M was popular not only in Asia, but also in North America and Europe, and interest in Lost Fantasy Online has risen significantly. Therefore, it is enough to withdraw the Korean subsidiary and stop the service. If you want to play the game, you can connect to a foreign server, create an account and sign up. There may be restrictions in marketing and various events, but that is not a big problem. At least it would be better than going head-to-head with the leisure department. However, Take-Two had a different idea. You are trying to kill the game industry with these ridiculous regulations. I can't stand still like this. What if I don't stand still? Take-Two clenched his fists and shouted. We must fight against unfair regulations to the end. I said, crazy. Since when did you become so passionate about fighting? From this moment on. This is the moment. There is a tendency to even call a musical number. Instead of singing, Take-Two sang Jong Ki-hong, the team leader who returned from his honeymoon. I said goodbye. Being a new groom, you have a clear mind. Did your honeymoon go well? Yes. We had a happy time thanks to the representative and vice president. I never imagined that I would ever fly a private plane in my life. It was like a dream. How beautiful is the sea in Cancun, and every morning when I wake up I start the day with Hyun-jong, thanking the CEO and the vice president for their consideration. Take-Two cut off those words and said, we'll talk about it later, and immediately call buster calls to major domestic game companies. Of course I didn't understand. What is a buster call? Call me Mo. From now on we will begin collective action. Yes. Are you going to gather game companies all of a sudden? I nodded. Just do it. Take-Two was burning alone. It's been a while since I've seen him so ambitious. Now we can't stop Take-Two. Okay. Do whatever you want. People should do what they want to do. I instructed the staff on the intercom. Please bring me some of the materials I mentioned. Yes, senior. No, sir. Less than an hour later, Yuri came up with a pile of materials. Here it is. Good work. I looked through those materials with Take-Two. The global game market is currently worth about $180 billion. It is growing at a high rate of more than 10% every year, and recently, the growth has grown even greater by combining with new technologies such as VR. The size of the Korean game market is about 15 trillion won. Exports rose more than 20% year-on-year, earning $8 billion last year alone. China accounts for half of the major exporting countries. However, imports are as large as exports. China accounts for the largest share of imports. It is a thing of the past to say that Chinese games are bad. We have invested so much in the meantime, and if you look at Chinese games that are coming out these days, you can believe that they are Korean or Japanese games. As the Chinese game market grew, so did Chinese game companies. As in other fields, Chinese game companies have grown into global players thanks to their huge domestic market, government support and technology copying. Recently, hit Chinese games have appeared in Korea. The most famous of these companies is Witchant. It is a comprehensive internet company that invests not only in games, but also in the internet industry such as Messenger, SNS, and cloud. The influence it has on the game world is enormous, not only directly developing and distributing games, but also hosting the world's largest esports, and acquiring or holding stakes in famous game companies in the US, Japan, and Korea. With a current market cap of 2.4 trillion yuan, it was once the #1 Chinese company and the #1 Asian company, but now it has been handed over to Sushing Electronics. Even in the early days of its establishment, Witchant toured Korean game companies, begging them to entrust the publishing to them. But now the situation has changed 180 degrees. As the Chinese market occupies an overwhelming proportion of Korean game exports, domestic game companies are all standing in line in front of Witchant and begging them to publish. Isn't China's game regulations too strict these days? Well, it is nothing compared to the regulations of the Ministry of Leisure. And they have a huge domestic market. I continued to look at the material. The Ministry of Leisure is not only regulating the game industry, but also the entire cultural industry such as broadcasting, film, and music. Whether it is trying to revive the pre-deliberation system for albums, or strengthening the standards for harmful media for youth. Recently, they have reached out to one-person broadcasters such as ATube to discover cases of gender equality violations, and announced that they will release guidelines and regulatory guidelines. In fact, it is not an exaggeration to say that the regulation of the Korean cultural industry began along with the history of the cultural industry. As Korea went through a military regime and rapid industrialization, only economic growth was the top priority. Therefore, factors that interfere with study and work were the target of eradication. Before the game, cartoons were designated as harmful media for teenagers and suffered all kinds of censorship and hardship. As a result, the Korean comics industry practically collapsed and had to depend on Japanese comics imports. After that, the cartoon market continued to stagnate for a long time until the webtoon market opened. Not all cartoons are dead. There was one magic word that could turn a bad cartoon that was scarier than a compatible mama into great content. What is that? Education. Cartoons are harmful and evil. However, if education is added to it and becomes educational cartoon, it will be beneficial and excellent. Even while the general comics market was devastated, the educational comics market was completely silent. Therefore, educational cartoons such as magic heavenly characters or Greek and Roman mythology through cartoons could have been born. The game industry is so large that it cannot be compared with comics. And unlike comics that can be produced by one person, professional manpower and huge capital are put in, so once an industry collapses, it is difficult to rebuild it. Of course, every industry needs regulation. The problem is that appropriate regulation is the basis for securing and nurturing the soundness of the industry, but excessive regulation cuts off the buds altogether. It would be better if all countries around the world regulate it together. However, if only Korea imposes severe regulations, it is no different than telling them to fight with their hands and feet tied. Let's say we eradicated domestic game companies in this way. So will all the problems be solved? You're welcome. As you can see from the scale of the game industry's import and export, foreign games will of course fill the void of domestic games. If the Ministry of Recreation puts the same regulations on foreign companies, it will immediately be brought to the WTO. In the end, excessive regulation only collapses the domestic game industry and yields nothing. OTK Company Headquarters Conference Room. About 50 people entered the largest conference room in the company. The game company representatives who received the buster call? From team leader Jong Ki-hong gathered in secret. Kim Jin-taek, president of LC Soft, Ju Won-hong, president of NA Games Ha Yu-sik, president of Let Marble etc. Large corporations, SMEs, listed companies, unlisted companies etc. It can be said that all major domestic game companies have gathered. Taekyu in a gray sweatshirt was sitting at the top and Sang Yi Benai fell to the side. Taekyu was holding the weight with his elbows on the table, interlocking his fingers. Some of the presidents of large game companies have seen them at parties, but most say they don't know who they are. Who is he? Why isn't Kong Jin-hoo but a part-timer sitting there? Didn't you come to the conference room by mistake? Or maybe he? Surely. Those eyes came and went. I got up and introduced Taekyu. I am Taekyu, Vice President of OTK Company. All but a few were shocked. 5. OTK Company Vice President. To lead OTK Company's investment in the cultural industry. The one who established the OTK Award for the development of subcultures. The existence of the Vice President of OTK Company in the game industry is very well known. This is because he is the one who made the Lost Fantasy M successful by investing in Shigeru Ichikawa. When everyone was seated, Taekyu looked around them and said, I have brought you all here to listen to the difficulties of the game industry today. It's great to see people who have developed games that I've loved since I was little in one place. First, there was time for self-introduction. Everyone grabbed the microphone and stood up and said their name. Taekyu, who was quietly listening to the introduction, opened his mouth. The boss of Hoon Game and Farming Game. You two can go out. Then they were surprised. Yes. Why? Taekyu just cut it off. I don't think of Go Stop and poker as games. It's just a gamble. So discuss the matter on your own. Hoon Game CEO Jang Suhwan said it was unfair. We also have Baduk. Anyone who hears it thinks it's a game of Go. Although the two companies have grown into Go Stop Poker and Baduk, they are also investing hard in mobile games and online games for image laundering. They are all ruined. The two talked hard about it and the presidents of other game companies came forward and took their side. Taekyu put the two of them back in their seats as if he had no choice. The self-introduction continued. This time it was the turn of a middle-aged man. I am Dong Soo-ju, the president of Under the Sea Soft. What? Under the... Taekyu screamed in anger. Get out. Come on, wait a minute, Deputy Chief. Wait, what? Get it out now. Security staff pulled CEO Dong Soo-ju outside. This time no one stopped. What the hell is this? Confused, I listened to the explanation and nodded. Ah, the legendary Sea story. The time is now 2004. At a time when the arcade game industry was struggling with the advent of PC rooms, an arcade game called Sea Story appeared like a comet. But this is a nice arcade, in fact it was closer to pachinko. It was so addictive and meandering that the Sea Story craze swept across the country. You and I were busy bringing in Sea Story game consoles and similar games that copied them were popping up all over the place. As a result of this, many people lost their wealth and committed suicide, and it became a social problem. In the end, the president was arrested, all game consoles were confiscated and destroyed, and the game company was closed. As a result of this incident, the perception of the game was extremely deteriorated, and the Game Rating Committee was born. The problem is that not only speculative games, but also general games have become the subject of regulation. Under the Sea Soft is a company founded by the people who made Sea Story in the past. Considering that the game industry has suffered because of them, I have nothing to say if I get kicked out. Team leader Jong Ki-hong bowed his head and said, Sorry. I did not know it was such a company. If you don't know much about the game, that might be it. After self-introduction and seat arrangement, the full-fledged meeting began. Currently, the biggest interest in the Korean game industry is the Act on the Prevention and Treatment of Internet Game Addiction Prevention and Support, proposed by the National Assembly. If this bill is passed, the game industry will be under the control of the Ministry of Recreation. All game companies were trembling in fear and were busy preparing countermeasures. In this situation, when the OTK company contacted me, I ran to him within a month. President Kim Jin-taek first complained of difficulties. We do not hire manpower, earn foreign currency by exporting, and fill the leisure time of the people. What the hell did we do wrong? The Ministry of Recreation regulates games, but the government tells us to export more games. How is this different from Korea's plan to encourage exports of nuclear power plants to foreign countries while denuclearization? I feel embarrassed that I am doing something bad even if it is not illegal. Many developers leave their companies because they are tired of regulation and censorship. Sometimes I feel guilty about making some kind of pest. Read more at wuxiax.com. I just want to make a game that everyone can enjoy. But these days I am ashamed to tell my children that I make games. A kid at school boasted that his dad made condensing and my kid didn't say anything in front of him. Is making a game a sin? Money is money, but professional pride is very important. However, since the game is treated like an illegal industry, there is no way developers will be motivated. The conversation continued for several hours. After their respective narration was over, Taekyu opened his mouth with a serious expression. I have listened to you all. The situation is much more serious than I thought. I think that the Korean game industry could really collapse. However, Taekyu looked around the conference room and continued. You have to admit that game companies have failed to fulfill their social responsibilities because they have been busy making money. If the industry had come up with a way to regulate speculation and addictiveness, the perception of the game wouldn't have been this messed up, and there wouldn't have been such a strong regulatory bill. For this issue, large game companies should first take responsibility and come up with a rational and autonomous regulatory plan. Some blushed and coughed but couldn't resist. As Taekyu said, the big game companies are also at fault for the situation to have reached this point. After all, are there any gamers who take the side of the leisure club because they get angry about drawing and billing? Taekyu raised his glasses and lowered his voice for nothing. From now on you must completely trust me. Trusting me means not being afraid no matter what the situation is, expecting you to see the best results. At those words, the faces of the game company presidents brightened. I am really? This meant that the OTK company was going to bear the guns for game regulation. There is no need to even explain the influence the OTK company has on the political and financial world. LC Soft President Kim Jin-taek jumped up and said, I will completely trust the vice president. Starting with this, the other bosses rose one by one. So do I. I will not be afraid no matter what happens. I look forward to seeing the best results. I believe. I will trust you and follow you. This is not a testimony of any faith. Taekyu nodded his head as if he was satisfied. Good. Again, please leave the game regulation issues entirely to me, and just focus on making good games. President Ha Chong-min advocated gender equality from the time of his candidacy. This was the case for all candidates. And after taking office he greatly strengthened the Ministry of Gender Equality and Family. He appointed a new political party leader, Congressman Shin, as minister, increasing the budget by 40% over the previous year. Compared to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of Unification and the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport, the Ministry of Leisure is small and has little administrative authority. The Ministry of Strategy and Finance has the National Tax Service and Customs Administration. The Ministry of Public Administration and Security has the National Police Agency and Fire Service. And the Ministry of Justice has the Prosecutor's Office. But the Ministry of Gender Equality and Family has no affiliated agencies. Moreover, most of the tasks under its jurisdiction overlap with other ministries. For example, the Ministry of Education for Youth Protection, the Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism for Cultural Industry Regulation, and the National Police Agency or Prosecutor's Office for Sex Crimes and Prostitution. However, after Senator Shin became a minister, she gradually expanded her activities with the support of the government and public opinion. As a result, she naturally encountered work with other ministries. In order for the government to announce a policy, it must go through an internal meeting and adjust the interests of each ministry. However, only the leisure women often played separately. A typical example is the issue of legalization of pornography. While it was a presidential directive and the ruling party favored it as a party argument, only the Leisure Department and the Liberal National Party voiced opposition. As the appearance of the hands and feet was constantly mismatched, there was a sign of embarrassment in the passport as well. Although some ministers and lawmakers were dissatisfied, Minister Shin received overwhelming support from women's circles and civil society groups. Therefore, even if there were complaints, everyone could not easily open their mouths. U.S. Secretary of State Shin supports lawmaker Lee Young-hai's bill, which she insisted on blocking all porn sites. Porn sexualizes women, undermines women's rights, undermines gender equality and has a detrimental effect on young people. Hidden cameras and revenge porn abound on the internet and countless victims are still suffering. Therefore, blocking sites that indiscriminately distribute pornography is the right action the government should take to protect the public. There is a misconception that some people ban all adult material, which is not true. Any legal adult material that has passed the deliberation can be viewed. So, what is the legal adult content that the Ministry of Leisure is talking about? It's an officially released Sorrow movie. Like Mrs. Who sees it these days? People who spread hidden cameras and revenge porn can be put to death, so please just allow some porn. It's no use. As long as there is Minister Shinmi, there is no answer. Facete connection is blocked. Why is this? SNI encryption or bypass with VPN. No matter how much the government censors the internet, there is a way. I know. I'm just annoyed that I have to do this all the way. It seems that the only country in the world where real adults can't watch adult movies is Korea. I just want to immigrate. Public opinion was pouring in to allow pornography, but Minister Shin Shin-mi did not give up. The same is true of this game regulation law. The Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism was in a position to have a wide discussion with the game industry and civic groups, including the shutdown system, but the Ministry of Recreation and Leisure raised their voices saying that regulation should be done alone. After the Ministry of Recreation gained regulatory authority, it literally swung the report of imputation throughout the cultural industry. Of course, the main target was the game. If similar regulations are imposed on albums or movies, it is easy to be criticized for pouring cold water into the popular Hallyu wave. In fact, even if only alcohol and tobacco are included in the lyrics of a song, it was designated as a harmful medium for young people, and gender equality broadcasting production guidelines were distributed, and the appearance of female idol singers should be regulated because the appearance of female idol singers was uniform. But the game is free from such issues. This is because social awareness is lagging behind compared to albums and movies, and the industry has also been focused on taking care of their own profits and has been putting their hands on self-regulation and social awareness improvement issues. The backlash is small, but the more you hit, the more votes you get from parents. Isn't the reason our kids can't study because of games? U.S. Secretary of State Shin Shin has been at the forefront of game regulation since his days in Congress. There was nothing harsh now that he ascended to the position of Minister of Leisure. Her idea was that the government should strictly control harmful media, whether it be pornography or games, to protect youth and women. She said, "We will closely review whether there are any elements that undermine sexuality, violence and gender equality or discriminate against women, and recommend correcting games that do not comply, and we will consider bans on distribution and fines if they are not followed." Unlike porn, money is at stake here. The Leisure Department needed more budget to fulfill its role, and game companies were the easiest targets to bet on. Therefore, the passage of the Act on the Prevention and Treatment of Internet Game Addiction Support was urgently needed. While U.S. Secretary Shin Shin worked hand-in-hand with lawmakers from the Liberal National Party to try to pass the bill, she went to warn public opinion about the dangers of gaming addiction. Taekyu, who had only played games on his way to work, has been busy for a long time. She first decided to come up with a proposal for self-regulation in the game industry, and for this she decided to create an association of game companies. As for regulation, the association should have great authority as it should be compulsory. And for this to happen, large developers must make concessions. Drafts of self-regulation have already been made. However, it was not possible to reach an agreement due to the refusal of large game companies. Because it was easier to make money if there were no regulations at all. The problem of speculation in domestic games was serious. There are not one or two games that have failed because they do not intend to make the game enjoyable, but only induce excessive sensibility. Among them, the most problematic is the so-called random box. It is also a problem to induce people to keep drawing until the desired item is found, and the probability that the probability is as bad as winning the lottery is also a problem. In some games, the management was caught while manipulating the odds. As a result, the perception of the game gradually deteriorated, and gamers turned their backs on foreign games and shouted, "Destroy Korean games." Taekyu gathered 5 major domestic game companies, including LC Soft NA Games and Let Mars. Considering the contents of the bill and the actions of the Ministry of Recreation, if it is passed, it will inevitably cause a huge blow to the entire game industry. It might end altogether. Shouldn't the industry first come up with a self-regulation plan before that? Taekyu persuaded them diligently rather than pressing down on the fact that he was the vice president of OTK company. Did you see self-driving electric cars driving on the road? Automobile companies that had been doing well in the past started to go bankrupt. I bet there will be a similar tectonic shift in the gaming industry in the future. This is not the time to scratch the money on the noses of children with random boxes and like them. You have to prepare for a bigger market in the future. After half a day of persuasion, the presidents of the 5 major game companies finally agreed to delegate authority to the association and accept the self-regulation proposal. After the bosses left, Taekyu said, "Even if the bill proposed to the National Assembly is not proposed this time, As long as the Ministry of Recreation is in charge of game regulation, similar things will be repeated at any time. I nodded. I will. There is only one fundamental solution to this problem. What is that? Taekyu raised his glasses to my question and said, the Ministry of Leisure is taking its hands off the regulation of the cultural industry and handing it over to the Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism. In the first place, the Ministry of Gender Equality and Family and the cultural industry have nothing to do with each other. Whether 10 billion won out of the 12 billion won budget set to support prostituted women is used for operating expenses, 10 million won for year-end memberships, or the budget devoted to developing youth typefaces, that is not for us to know. It is not that other ministries do not have a similar waste of budget. The problem is the regulation of the cultural industry. Being able to regulate something shows the power a ministry has. This is why regulations once established do not disappear easily. Will the leisure ministry give up that power? You have to make it happen. In fact, there has been talk for a long time about unifying cultural industry policy work, including games, with the Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism. Unlike the Leisure Department, the Culture Department has a higher understanding of subculture. Among the Secretary of the National Assembly's Moon Kwang Committee, there are some from the game industry. I remembered what I had seen in the material Yuri had brought me. But just because the Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism is not regulating it doesn't mean it doesn't. Wasn't there a riot after regulating indie games this time? After the Sea Story incident, which caused the entire nation to become addicted to gambling, there are some who claim this is a game addiction. A law that requires all games to undergo preliminary review has been established. This law was applied to commercial games, but for some reason non-profit games that are not suddenly sold by the Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism must undergo prior deliberation, and they threatened criminal punishment if the game was shared without prior deliberation. Sites that received the official notice closed their bulletin boards, and Dream Trees, who were developing Flash games, lost the opportunity to showcase their games. You might think that it will be necessary to undergo preliminary deliberation, but to do so, costs hundreds of thousands of won and a long time are required. The Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism is in the position of applying the law because there is a law, but it is like the Food and Drug Administration crackdown on sharing a packed lunch from home. It was absurd, and there was a strong backlash that the game development ecosystem would be uprooted if done wrong, and the Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism took a step back, saying that it would suspend the crackdown on non-profit games and review the law. Still, the Culture Department is better than the Leisure Department. To say that you back away because public opinion opposes it is because you are still a communicative opponent. It's a different way of looking at the game in the first place. The Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism sees games as culture and regulates them, but the Ministry of Gender Equality and Family sees them as harmful media for young people. I nodded. If I had to be beaten, it would be better for me to communicate. Parliament was opened by agreement of the opposition parties. It was decided to prioritize the bills that had not been dealt with in the meantime, and this included the Act on the Prevention and Treatment of Internet Game Addiction Support. There was not much time now. The presidents of the 5 major game companies met with Minister of Culture, Sports and Tourism Kim Kuk-cheon and Secretary Moon Kwang-wai in turn to propose a self-regulatory proposal made by the industry. OTK Company took the initiative and announced its position. OTK Games completely rejects the request for cooperation in self-regulation from the Ministry of Gender Equality and Family, and clearly opposes the unfair game regulation. We will jointly respond to various regulatory laws. As soon as the announcement was made, the media poured out articles. Breaking news. OTK Company opposes game regulation in the Leisure Department. Read more at wuxiax.com. The spread of the shutdown system. Will the brakes be applied? Support the announcement of OTK Company in the game industry. Domestic game companies agree to make self-regulation measures. Public opinion is divided on the game regulation. Experts: game addiction is a serious disease. Parents' organizations, religious organizations. Game regulations need to be strengthened. OTK Company declares an all-out war against the Leisure Department. Game sites such as Lulu Web were outraged. Why do you only have games? Isn't it a study addiction to study 12 hours a day at school, Palm or cram school? Then study should be regulated. You can't play games without sleeping at night, but you can study or go out and play. Arrest all those who make and play games by making the game illegal. If the bill is passed, game junkies will be forcibly put into an addiction treatment center as if they were dragged to a mental hospital. There are lines of people to be dragged here. The problem with Korean game companies is the problem. What is the difference between a random box and a pachinko? Right? Games these days are just a matter of luck. All game companies in Korea have to go bankrupt to get their mind right. It is true that speculative and addictive regulations should be regulated, but not this way. The Blue House and the ruling party were astonished. If I were to list the evils that Jin Hu-kong has committed against politicians, a few books are not enough. Therefore, if you are a politician with culture and common sense, you have tried not to get entangled with Kong Jin-hu. But this happened because of an official letter from the Ministry of Leisure. As the situation showed signs of escalation, the government decided to summarize and announce its position after reaching a conclusion at the ministerial meeting of the relevant ministries. However, even before the meeting was held, Minister Shin Min-mi first appeared in front of the press. She said in an angry voice, "Gaming addiction is a serious disease and regulation is essential," she said. Recently, more and more addictive and speculative games are coming out, and statistics show that 20% of teenagers suffer from over-immersion. If you over-immerse yourself in the game, your studies will be disrupted, your grades will drop, and you will become violent. Game addiction changes even the brain structure, making it more difficult to get out of addiction. So the World Health Organization (WTO) is planning to define gaming as a serious disease. However, I can't help but feel angry and concerned about OTK Company, a global company, for abandoning its social responsibility of protecting youth, undermining gender equality, and continuing misogynistic behavior. In any case, I will not back down for game regulation and game addiction treatment. I ask the public to support the passage of the bill. The ruling party was in shock. Not too long ago, the Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism was doing a nonsensical joke of sticking a knife in a non-profit game, so there was widespread dissatisfaction with the game regulations. However, this time the OTK Company and the Ministry of Gender Equality and Family had a head-on conflict over this issue. New Politics Party floor leader Jang Hyun-jun urgently convened lawmakers. What do you think Minister Shin Jong-mi is thinking? The party is still stable. Representative Hong Hyun-woo said. It seems that the Blue House didn't know either. Then is it a protrusion? Yes. It is said that the official message sent to the entire game industry was conducted without consulting the Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism. Floor leader Jang Hyun-jun clicked his tongue. No, why did you send an official letter that is not compulsory? Where would the leisure department be the only one sending useless official messages? The problem is that it somehow touched Jin Hu-kong. In fact, game regulation has been a trend that has been passed down since the previous government. However, the current government is only strengthening it. The lawmakers first reviewed the request for cooperation in online game self-regulation, sent by the Ministry of Leisure. Then I couldn't help but be embarrassed. Prohibition of discrimination against women in games, ban on stereotypes of gender roles between female and male characters, ban on sexual objectification of female characters, ban on uniform appearance of female characters. No, what kind of game character's appearance are you making a fuss about? What kind of five-ball air is it now? Who made this memo? Representative Jang Jangjia, who was well aware of the situation in the leisure department, answered. It is said that it was produced with advice from the Gender Equality Promotion Agency, an organization under the Ministry of Leisure. What does that have to do with the game? I'm fine too. Floor leader Jang Hyun-jun said he seemed frustrated. The game that OTK Games will release. What was that? Lost Fantasy Online. Anyway, is Kong Jin-hu doing this for fear of regulating it? Lim Byung-guk said. It is said that the vice president came directly to this matter, not the CEO Kong Jin-hu. Oh, take you vice president? Isn't the cultural industry in charge of CEO Park Sang-yeep of K Company? CEO Park Sang-yeep is from the entertainment industry. All subcultures, including the game, are managed by the vice president. The investment in OTK Games and the establishment of the OTK Award are all known as the decisions of the vice president. He has a constituency in Pangeo where game companies are clustered, and he has the best understanding of the game industry within the party. And now he is the secretary of the Moon Kwangwei. As a first-time member of the council, it would not have been the subject of attention normally, but now it is different. Everyone looked at him as most of the lawmakers were ignorant of the game. The problem seems to be the game addiction treatment law that has been proposed to the National Assembly, rather than the official document. Representative Hong Hyun-woo said. What's wrong with treating gaming addiction? Words are the cure for game addiction and, in fact, the game regulation law. For addiction treatment, it is the easiest way to get rid of the cause of poisoning. However, the situation in the game industry is not very good right now. Chinese game companies that have grown in size are accelerating their entry into the Korean market, and Japanese games which were centered on console games are expanding online and mobile. Lost Fantasy M and Online are representative. After all, Korean games are like sandwiches on both sides. In this situation, if only Korea strengthens regulations, it will be like only foreign game companies do good things. Representative Lim Byung-guk conveyed the difficult situation of the game industry, but the lawmakers did not have much interest in it. So what do you think OTK company will do? In Korea, the 5 major game companies are more influential than OTK games. They said they would create an association and self-regulate, so it would be good to watch. Then what about the bill? You have to oppose it. First of all, this is absurd. If these regulations are applied to American game companies as they are, will President Ronald stand still? Considering the equity with other cultural industries, this law should never be passed. Representative Park Chong-soo said cautiously. But the law has strong parental support. If you oppose it as a party argument, you will be severely criticized for saying, "Are you going to take responsibility if my child's grades drop?" If you look at the game industry vote or the parent vote, the latter is overwhelmingly large. Before the situation escalates, please stop Minister Shin Min-mi. Is there anyone out there to stop me? At that word, the lawmakers just coughed in vain and turned their heads all at once. It was an honest feeling that everyone did not want to get involved in this matter. I watched the announcement of the Minister of Gender Equality and Family on TV. The presentation was much stronger than expected. Minister Shin Mi did not hide her angry expression and voice. Well, that's it. But what does this have to do with violating gender equality? Taekyu said it was natural. I did not know. If you oppose the policy of the Ministry of Leisure, you are undermining gender equality. Ah. Was it like that? It sounds like it will be a difficult fight just by hearing these words. I didn't get involved in this fight in the first place. But as long as Oh Taekyu has decided, there is nothing he can do. The pros and cons are already hot on the internet. Some support OTK company, while others support the Ministry of Gender Equality and Family. On the internet, liberals and conservatives usually fight side by side, but this time it was a little different. Netizens are against the game regulation, both liberal and conservative, and parents are in favor. Other than that, there was definitely one effect. That's what brought this problem to the surface. Originally, people who play games have no interest in anything other than games. The Horde is busy beating the Alliance and the Alliance is busy beating the Horde. The shutdown system does not apply to most adult gamers anyway. Rather, there were some users who said it was good because there were no minors after 12 o'clock. If it doesn't work, just skip to a foreign game and that's it. However, with this incident, game regulation emerged as a social issue, and the media focused on articles. Most of the articles only highlight the bad side of the game, though. From a business standpoint, fighting with government agencies is something you want to avoid, because it has administrative authority over there. However, you can't just stand still. As it was confirmed that the Leisure Department would not back down, we checked the available cards. From the very beginning of her tenure, the U.S. Secretary of State for Leisure and Leisure was clearly aware of her role and responsibilities. It was to improve women's rights and interests and protect youth. Advertising, music, movies, dramas, novels, cartoons, etc. There are many harmful contents that adversely affect youth, but among them, games were the biggest problem. Trading card games have a strong meandering ability to draw cards, and sports games encourage competition. In FPS you shoot each other with a gun, and in RPG you take a knife or an axe and hit your opponent to death. The more enemies you kill, the higher your level and the stronger you become. The main characters of the game are mostly male, and all female characters are sexy and pretty. In some games, a number of young female characters called Lori also appeared. There is even a game called Mayanshi, where multiple female characters appear and seduce them. She has been arguing that the subjugation law should be applied more strictly to animation than to live-action films featuring people, and the same goes for games. Violence, sensationalism, speculative, addictive, gender discrimination, misogyny, etc. The game was a total mess. Therefore, it was absolutely necessary to correct these games and block the access of young people. It was natural for the game industry to pay the cost to solve the problems caused by this. Now, if only the bill is passed, all problems will be solved. Suddenly, at this point, OTK company came forward and announced that it would gather game companies and create a self-regulation plan. In addition, he met the Minister of Culture, Sports and Tourism and the Vice Minister in succession along with the officials, and contacted lawmakers belonging to Moon Kwangwai. This meant that the Ministry of Gender Equality and Family would discuss game regulation issues separately. We cannot stand still and watch this situation. The politicians shrugged as if struck by lightning, but Minister Shin Shinmi openly criticized the OTK company. After her presentation, a ministerial meeting was held. The meeting held in private was actually a place to persuade Minister Shin Minmi. Games are a cultural industry and an IT industry. It also plays a role in creating jobs and earning foreign currency. Therefore, the interests of most ministries such as the Ministry of Strategy and Finance, the Ministry of Science and ICT, the Ministry of SMEs and Startups, the Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism, the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Health and Welfare are intertwined. Ministries in favor of regulation have also turned to the position of reviewing the industry's self-regulation proposal until it comes out. Deputy Prime Minister Han Myung-guk said, "How about the Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism to take charge of this issue in the future? I heard that the game industry also wants to talk to the Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism to solve the problem." However, Secretary Shin made it clear that she would never give up her regulatory authority. This is the responsibility of the Ministry of Recreation. The Ministry of Recreation will take care of it. In the end, the persuasion was unsuccessful. The Ministry of Gender Equality and Family has decided to hold a debate on the healthy use of Internet games for adolescents and the healing of game addiction, hosted by the minister at the government complex in Seoul. Affiliated organizations such as the Youth Protection Management Agency, the Home Health Promotion Agency, and the Gender Equality Promotion Agency will participate, and various groups such as parent groups, religious groups, and Youth Health National Solidarity will participate in free discussion. However, as you can see from the faces of the participants, it was correct to view it as a publicity meeting to inform the participants about the dangers of game addiction and the need for regulation. Only the name of the discussion forum. This can be seen from the fact that the meeting itself is held privately, but the minutes of the meeting are made public. It will come to the conclusion that we have to regulate games and collect money from game companies anyway. In the game industry, there was talk about whether or not to hold an event or a discussion forum to promote the merits of games in order to respond. Then suddenly an unexpected article appeared. Breaking news. Debate hosted by the Minister of Leisure. OTK company revealed its intention to participate. Seo Kong-jin, who, are you attending in person? Scheduled to convey the position of the game industry. Secretary John Mi Shin, it does not matter whoever attends. Ministry of Gender Equality and Family accepted OTK company participation request. Due to full capacity, no more attendance is allowed. When I saw the article, I was surprised. Who said you were going to participate? Ting said proudly. 1. Are you going directly to the discussion forum? Huh. I applied for 2 people, so you are going too. I was perplexed. Why me? I'm scared of that woman. I'm scared too. The opponent is the Minister of Gender Equality and Family. I think it would be more convenient to fight against the president. Anyway, if you let him go alone, you never know what he'll do. Someone has to go and dry it. For several hours before going to the discussion forum, I was instilled in take you with the education and ideas that games are right. After completing the various tests, Take You patted my shoulder and said, "My friend, now the fate of the Korean game world depends on you. Don't forget, if Korean games fail, it's all because of you. Why is that for me? Come into the debate with that determination." Okay. Read more at wuxiax.com. I don't know what kind of trouble this is because I met the wrong friend. Game sites such as Lulu Web were outraged. I think I'm going to cry right now. Are you going to walk into the enemy camp alone after the earthquake? This time the deputy representative is also going. What? Really? Finally, does the main character not hide his power? Dangerous. Do not go. Logic can't beat illogical. Cool. I'm sorry for blaming you for being a speculator. I'm cheering for you this time. OTK Company versus Ministry of Gender Equality and Family. Hey. This is truly the greatest match of the century. The loser should put everything down neatly and retire from politics or business. Standing up for fun. Can't it be broadcast live in real time? Fighting Minister Shin Jeonmi. Go. Go and launch the game bulk of justice that will destroy the game rules. Isn't that a gay bulk? Gungnir is more destructive than gay bulk. Jukcheng is the best. Everyone is equal in front of the bamboo spear. One room for you, one room for me. Everyone. Can't we just stand still like this? Let's go and cheer too. Good idea. Let's show the power of gamers. It's no use. We won't be. Even people who play the same game fight in different races, can't they unite? If unity had been possible, the leisure department wouldn't have played the game like this. It's hard to get out of the house. You have to play at that time. It's still cold. What if I catch a cold? There is a lot of fine dust these days. It's too dangerous outside the blanket. It would be nice if there were 1 or 10 people together. Several groups in favor of game regulation decided to hold a large-scale rally in front of the government complex in Seoul. Gamers, on the other hand, didn't even think about going out. But the day before the discussion, OTK Games Korea and 5 major game companies decided to hold an event to distribute limited edition character costumes for each online game. It's not about giving out actual clothes. It's about giving out registration coupons that characters in the game can wear. Those who didn't know much about the game laughed at who would come out to get it. But on that day, gamers flocked to the front of the government complex in Seoul like a cloud. Even the cold and fine dust could not stop them.